Attendees are going to join. All right, welcome this evening. It'll take us a little while for everybody to get in to the session right now, and we hope everyone is having a good evening. It's very unseasonably warm here in the Chicago area, and hopefully everybody's having good weather here. So let's start out in a second. So today's webinar is 5 marketing principles every business must get right to maximize result. And our presenter is Mark James, and Mark is the president of Performance Advisors Group. And my name's John Fisher, and I'm one of over 60 mentors with our SCORE check here, North Chicago or North Cook and Lake counties. And I'm going to be the moderator today. So this session is going to be recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel in a few days here. And so just some housekeeping items. So please, there's a Q&A function as well as a chat function. And so please submit your questions into the Q&A function. And then let's see. Sorry, we're into the Q&A function, and then we will answer those at the end of the session here. Mark will answer those at the end of the session. So let's see here. The SCORE is a resource partner of the U.S. Small Business Administration. So we provide free confidential mentoring for small businesses. And our website has a very large library of resources for people who want to start a business or grow a business. So if you want to request a mentor, you can visit, I think you can move the slide, another one here, Mark. There you go. If you can, if you want to request a mentor, you can go to our website here, which is kind of down at the bottom. It is www.score.org/North Chicago. And as you can see, we have over 70 mentors in our chapter, and we have not only the free mentoring, but we also do webinars such as this. Excuse me. So to start ourselves off here, and Mark, I think you can go to the next slide there. I'm going to do a poll, which we do for the session here. Let me get that all squared away. There we go. So we've got 3 questions here. First one is, what stage of business are you in currently? The second one is, if you're in business, how many employees do you have? And that goes from it's just me to over 100. And then the third question is relevant for the session that we're having today, is what describes your current marketing efforts? So that is, we have a formal marketing strategy and a tactical plan. We do ad hoc tactics as the need arises, and we have no formal strategy or plan. Excuse me. And as we suspected, a lot of the people here have no formal strategy or plan. So welcome to the webinar, and Mark will help you in that endeavor here. Right. So it looks like we have a lot of people here who are in business, thinking about being in a business or in a business for 1 to 5 years. So I'm going to end this and share the results here. Okay. Now, Mark James is the president, as I said, of Performance Advisors Group, and he assists companies in achieving sustainable growth by elevating people engagement and performance, eliminating waste and inefficiency, and improving channel effectiveness, and guiding successful change. So Mark has over 40 years of experience across a wide range of industries in the workplace. And he also has experience with different channel performance, change management, customer loyalty, and measurement. So, Mark, please begin the presentation and we'll come back for the questions at the end of the session.
Great. John, thank you very much. And hello, everybody this evening. Happy you're here. And I was watching those poll results come in, John, and helpful to have a sense of what our audience is encountering right now. And regarding those that don't have a formal plan, I think you'll walk away tonight with some stuff that will help you move in that direction. So let me start by asking a question. And this is just a philosophical question. You can put something in chat if you want, but how do you feel when you answer your telephone and it's a telemarketer? Or when someone shows up at your door to sell you something? Or how about seeing the same commercial over and over again while you're watching television? Do these tactics tend to cause you to tune out or just outright ignore them altogether? Do you ever remember seeing something clever or funny about a commercial, but not the product or service being promoted? If you did, you're not alone. Now, these tactics work to some extent. Otherwise, the sponsors wouldn't spend money on them. If nothing else, they may be just trying to create awareness. And that certainly is one of the objectives that marketing needs to accomplish. But are these tactics all effective? All that effective? Because we're always being sold to everywhere, every day, and every place that we look or hear or see. So my first advice today is from Jeffrey Gitomer. He said, quote, "People don't want to be sold, but they do want to buy," unquote. So keep this in mind when you think about your marketing and what I'm going to go through here this evening. Here's another question for you. Have you ever heard someone say this about their marketing? Yeah, we tried that and it didn't work. I have many, many times. And every time I've discovered that they're missing one or more key things that's causing them to make mistakes that's wasting time and money. Now, marketing presentations like this often talk about individual tactics and tools to improve results. I'm not going to do that today. Now, don't get me wrong. Tactics and tools are an important element of marketing, but they aren't the only things that determine marketing success. Instead, I want to arm you with a different perspective. I'm going to explore the ways that the things that often go missing because everyone is concentrating on tactics or the hot idea of the day. Specifically, I want to dispel the notion that all a business needs for marketing success is some magic bullet. Searching for that magic marketing bullet is the equivalent of looking for the lost city of Atlantis. Instead, marketing is about the fundamentals and a simple but powerful formula that I'm going to point out why in a moment too. Now, what you see in the slide here are what I call mistakes that are the marketing equivalent of a cleanup needed in aisle 5. In my 40 plus years working with clients in multiple industries, I can distill the most common mistakes to these handful of few. The shiny key syndrome is being obsessed with trending marketing gimmicks like shiny keys to a cat. Doing marketing is a series of one-off tactics with no strategy connecting them. The wing it trap. Let's try this and see what we get. Let's wing it. Expecting overnight results is a very tempting expectation, but I'll get into why it almost never works. Blind trial and error is another common mistake. Now, trial and error is a part of good marketing, but not if it's done blindly. And lastly, a very common mistake is that marketing is all about us and not the customer. It's kind of like thinking and saying, hey, you don't know us, but we want to be your new best friend. Now, these are all avoidable so long as you apply a simple formula and 5 principles. Marketing need not be complicated. Think of it in the form of this equation. Marketing is common sense plus a purpose plus a method. Then you use this anagram below it to remember the 5 principles. HPPDR. Picture these principles as the foundation for that equation, and also to consider the 5 principles as the common sense component of the equation itself. And not following these 5 principles will cause you to waste time and money. So let's go through each of them and I'll show you what I mean. The other thing to keep in mind here is getting these right will mean that you'll achieve results that count, that can be counted. Fundamental principle number 1, think holistically about your marketing. See the whole marketing picture, not just its individual parts separated. Marketing can lose sight of the big picture and what is important to accomplish, and that's a very common occurrence. We should always view marketing, as they say, as a whole and not just its individual pieces. How everything should fit together versus standing alone. I often see companies jump directly into tactics before understanding their big picture strategy. And this is often made worse by the temptation to grab onto the latest marketing shiny keys before considering how they fit or not into the big picture. The takeaway here with this fundamental principle is to think big picture first and always tactics second. Principle number 2 is to have a plan. Winging it doesn't work. It's an easy trap to fall into, but I'm reminded of something that Sun Tzu said in his writing, The Art of War, several centuries ago. He said, quote, "Tactics without strategy is the noise before the defeat," unquote. A good plan is the method in the marketing equation. Start with the end in mind, because no plan means no discipline, and no discipline wastes time and money. It's also very important to prioritize your marketing imperatives. That is, what is it your marketing must accomplish and in what order? Commit to doing the necessary research to inform your plan, as opposed to sitting back and saying, I think this is what we need to do. It's better to have done some research, talk to potential customers, talk to, if you can, get intelligence from competitors, understand the marketplace. So do that necessary research to help inform your plan. And lastly, don't be distracted. Create your plan and stick to it. Yes, be prepared to make refinements, but stick to your plan and don't be distracted. Let me illustrate a story based upon a rerun I saw recently of the old TV show Magnum PI. If you remember, it starred Tom Selleck as a private detective in Hawaii. And in this particular show, it was actually the premiere episode of the series. And he was actually testing the security of the compound where he lived. It was a wealthy man who owned it, and he lived there. And he was testing the security to see how easily the property could be breached. And the security measures included 2 Doberman Pinscher dogs, if you recall that series. Well, he succeeded in getting onto the property and distracting the dogs and made his way to the red Ferrari in the driveway as part of his mission to not only breach the property, but also get in the car and take it off the property. Well, the car was locked. So he gets to the car, and the car is locked. So he's working on the lock to get it unlocked. And the dogs have finally gotten out, and they realize he's there, and they're coming after him. And he's looking at the dogs, he's looking at the lock, and finally he says, forget the dogs, work the lock, work the lock. The point of the story is work your plan, don't be distracted. Here's a picture of the buyer's purchase journey. Now, great marketing recognizes that buyers are on a journey, and it's important for you to interact with them to learn more about them in each of the stages and help them move through these 4 stages of the buying journey, where the first step is to create awareness that you're there and you have products and services to help them. That then leads to generating interest in those products and services, which ultimately leads to a sense of a desire for what you have to offer, and then ultimately an actual purchase. Everything marketing needs to achieve falls into just 4 imperatives. As I said, the imperatives are they're only 4 of them, and they are the purpose in the marketing equation. Now, generating demand and acquiring business is the most important one that people think about when they think about marketing. But there are 3 other imperatives that must not be forgotten. Without awareness in the marketplace, your business will struggle to generate demand and to see orders. So promoting your brand and image and your organization in the marketplace are also very important. Your business must also interact with customers to understand what they need so that you can ensure you're creating products and services that they're going to eagerly adopt and want to buy. And lastly, it's also imperative that employees have that their perception of your brand and culture are consistent with the brand promise and the image that your marketing is putting into the marketplace. Because if you have a disconnect between how employees view the brand promise and how the marketplace views that, that's going to diminish the results of your marketing. Now, how you prioritize these imperatives depends on where your business is in its life cycle, market conditions, and competition. If you're an existing mature business or a business that's maturing, clearly generating demand and acquiring business is probably the number 1 priority. But never forget to keep interacting with customers to make sure your products and services will continue to be equally adopted. On the other hand, if you're a new startup business, You can't expect many orders if people don't know you're there. So promoting your image and your brand and positioning yourself in the marketplace is probably the first imperative to work on. Principle number 3, allow your marketing the time it needs to work. I get it. There's always pressure to deliver results sooner than later. However, remember this, you cannot rush great marketing because prospects and customers are on their own schedule, not yours. They may not be at the point in their purchase journey to buy just yet. For high ticket, complex products or services, a relationship with the buyer needs to be nurtured first to create buyer confidence to act. And for commodity products where there's little to nothing to differentiate one from another, the buying journey is usually a little shorter. So it's more important there to know when the purchase is imminent. In either case, your marketing must match your buyer's state of mind. Number 4, use data about how customers in the marketplace interact with your products and services to make better informed marketing decisions. And here it's helpful to remember what Peter Drucker said. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Your marketing data and analytics should constantly evolve as you increase knowledge of buyer behavior. Good data and analytics enable you to do that by continuously refining marketing content and messaging so that you're always delivering the right message to the right customer at the right time at the lowest cost. Also, understand how each buyer wishes to be communicated to. There's no one size fits all. That's just the reality of the world. Some people are into no social media, and that's what they pay attention to. Some people pay attention to electronic media, such as radio and TV. Some people rely on newspapers. Some people, believe it or not, still rely on direct mail. And then again, even believe it or not, some people rely on a phone call. It's different for each customer. So that's part of knowing your customers in addition to where they are in their journey. Also, have a database for your marketing data that's dedicated to marketing itself. Trying to force a database for some other portion of your business will not properly support marketing. So for instance, if you have a database that's supporting the production of your products or services or a financial database, leave that work to those purposes and structure a database that's dedicated just to marketing. And lastly here, informed trial and testing is a legitimate part of marketing, but you need to do it from an informed point of view. And so when you use data, you eliminate the guesswork behind that trial and testing. Now, it's important to involve your marketing data and analytics as well. And if we look at this graph, you'll see that historically, analytics tended to analyze what's already happened in a business through standard reporting. What have you done already with your marketing or with your business in terms of sales and results and cash flow and everything else? You might have done some ad hoc analysis where you've looked at where you've done better versus other areas. Those are the equivalent of looking sort of in the wake of the boat as you're moving forward and you're seeing what has happened, and you may not have a picture of what's coming up. Once you've done that, then you're in a position to move from there to look for patterns in your marketing data. And this is where data mining comes into play, where you look for patterns that exist that can provide clues to things like buyer behavior itself, or is there seasonality to what you offer? And also what are the nuances in the product mix that you're offering? And you combine all together so that you have some hidden intelligence there that you can cover that can help you with your marketing to direct your messaging and what you want to talk about. And then you really accelerate value from your marketing and the ROI when you can actually get to the point where you move from looking in the wake of the boat to forward and actually predicting what's going to happen in the future with predictive models, and then ultimately optimize what you're doing so you can guide the best outcomes. Now, here's an example of how good knowledge of customers and their behavior can increase response to marketing. This is an actual example from some work I did several years ago with Caterpillar, the construction machinery manufacturer. We did a marketing campaign in North America across all their customers of their dealers. And these are 3 messages that we put out as part of that marketing campaign. And the point I want to make here is that you'll notice that we had response rates to these 3 different messages that were 14%, 11.9, and 14.2. And a response in this case was a customer who received a direct mail piece. This was 100% direct mail because the audience was not in tune with email, and this was in the days prior to a heavy social media. This was the construction arena and related industries. They responded to direct mail. So a response here was someone that received direct mail piece and contacted the dealer to talk about Cat Work Tools. The industry average, by the way, in the construction industry for a response to direct mail was 2.7%. So we were dramatically higher than the industry average. But what I want to point out is look what happens when we start to target the messaging by customers given criteria. In this first example, get more from your CAT equipment with CAT Work Tools. You'll notice here LTV greater than 9 and LTB greater than 9. Those are two models that we create, two statistical models we created based upon doing some data mining. And we were able to determine that with current customers that had a high likely lifetime value, that is, they had been purchasing and they were somewhat of a loyal customer and they were highly likely to buy. It was a scale of a 1 to 10. So the higher the number, the more likely they were to buy, the more likely they were to have a higher lifetime value. So when we segmented that message to this customer base and to customers that had annual sales over $50,000, so basically customers that were larger than small, we had a 16.1% response rate, which was 60% higher than just randomly sending that message out to all customers across all segments. In the second message, how can CAT Work Tools improve your productivity? We had an overall response rate of 11.9. The random message to all segments was just 8.7. But again, we targeted highly likely to buy and high lifetime value customers in the top 2 deciles. And you can see what happened to the response rate. It increased fairly dramatically. And then in the last question, or the last message here, CAT Work Tools built for your business. Overall response rate of 14.2%. In this case, we targeted industries using SIC codes. So we targeted these 2 industries and then high likely to buy and lifetime value. We had almost a 19% response rate versus about a 9% response rate for just a random messaging across all segments. So we more than doubled the response rate. The point here is that you're able to target your messaging and see good results when you have some information and do some analysis based on data mining and looking at segments and then directing the message. And by the way, in this overall project, we had a 60-to-1 marketing ROI and an average increase in dealer sales of 5x. So there was dramatic results, and that was possible because we were able to do this very refined and targeted messaging. Fundamental number 5, be relevant. Demonstrating an understanding of what customers are looking for is the most effective way to connect with them. Now, I've got news for all of you. Customers don't care about you. Don't be offended. They don't care about me either. What they do care about is how you can help solve their needs. Understand what stage of the purchase journey their customers are in. And when you connect with the buyer's emotional state and their needs, you only need about 10% of the message to be about you to generate interest, intent, and a purchase. And again, remember that one message does not fit all, just like one delivery medium does not fit all. Consider who should get what message and what medium to use. And the best example I can think of about consider who gets what message, I would contend that you don't talk to your grandmother the same way you talk to your best friend. Now, the customer experience is very important to keep in mind when you're talking about marketing. Your marketing should convey the promise of your brand and your products and services. That is, what can customers expect when they interact and transact with your business? So it's very important that you actually convey that promise and don't overpromise. Make sure your business can consistently deliver what it promises, because it's the entire customer experience that they have that matters, not just the marketing itself. And customers can have one of 3 experiences with a business. So I wanted to talk about these for a second because they do relate to and they connect into your marketing and that brand promise. But the customer experience at the end of the day is going to be what you're able to deliver against what you're promising in your marketing. The first type of experience, there are 3 kinds of experiences a customer can have with a business. The first one is what I call the neutral experience. Best example I can think of here is I'm hungry. I go to a restaurant. I want to go out to eat. And I go to a restaurant. I was hungry and I had a meal and I was satisfied. It was fine. It was good. I may or may not come back. I like Coke, but I'll drink Pepsi. Being satisfied does not mean loyal. Don't confuse the two. Experiences that merely satisfy a customer do not guarantee a loyal customer who will buy more often and stay. Now, the really bad outcome in terms of a customer experience is what I call the disturbance distress experience. It destroys satisfaction and loyalty wherever it occurs. These are experiences that everyone will hear about and they are toxic to your brand, your image, and your results. And I'm sure you can all think of specific examples we all have where we've had a very negative experience that disturbed and distressed us. And we remembered it and we remembered it, and we probably tell everybody else. And it makes for an unlikely occurrence that will ever come back. Now, the best outcome in terms of a customer experience, in terms of the total experience that a customer has with your business, based upon what your marketing promises is presenting, is what I call the surprise and delight experience. And it's the only one of the three that leads to actual customer loyalty. Let me give you an example of what I call a surprise and delight experience that happened to me a few years ago. I wanted to have a new pair, some new dress socks. This is back in the days when I wore a suit every day. Fortunately, I don't do that anymore. But in those days, I wanted to get a particular kind of sock. So I knew Von Maur had a nice selection. They're an upscale department store headquartered out of Iowa. And I went to the local store here in the Chicago area. And I went to the men's store, and a salesman asked me if I could help, if he could help me. And I said, yeah, I'm looking for this kind of stock. And I described it. And he said, we don't have any in Florida. Let me go back and look. Went back and he searched. He came out and he said, I apologize, but we don't have any in stock here, but I'd be happy to ship them to you. I said, that would be great. So I paid for them. I gave him my address, went home. A few days later, a package or a box arrived from Von Maur. I opened up the shipping box, and inside the shipping box was a nice, fine white gift box from Von Maur. I opened up the box. Inside was nicely folded over tissue. I opened up the tissue. Inside were my socks perfectly arranged. And on top of the socks was a note, an envelope with my name handwritten on it. I opened up the note, and inside was a handwritten note from the person who packed my shipment at their warehouse, thanking me for my business. To me, that's an example of a surprise and delight experience. Now, did it take time to do that? Yes. Did I remember it? Well, I am. I'm telling you several years later, and all you find people out there that I had that surprise and delight experience. Quite often, it's the simple things like that that are very powerful that can cause that surprise and delight experience that will keep customers coming back for more. Now, let's also talk about why customers leave. And it's not just based on the experience per se. I've been tracking some research for several years on the major reasons why customers leave, and the top 5 are these. 1% of the time, customers leave because they expire. It just happens. We're all mortal. The number 4 reason in terms of the reasons why customers leave, 3% of the time they move away. Their business up and leaves for whatever reason. The second and third most common frequent reasons, tied at 14% of the time, is that they're either lured away by the competitor, or they're actually dissatisfied with the actual product or service that's being offered. Now, the number 1 reason customers leave, almost 7 out of 10 times, is because they experienced a poor attitude or a difference toward their business. What's very interesting is that when I ask people, what do you think the real reason is? Quite often people will say, well, poor service. And poor service is partly the answer, but it specifically was a poor attitude or indifference. So it's important to remember here, another point to keep in mind is that when it comes to you delivering the experience your marketing is going to promise to the marketplace, don't over-rely on technology or product features to guarantee customer loyalty. I've yet to encounter any technology or product feature that can overcome an employee who does not make the customer feel welcome or appreciated. Also, notice here how price isn't even one of the top 5 reasons. So here are some key takeaways. It's important to prioritize your marketing imperatives. That is, what is it your marketing must accomplish? And there's only 4 categories, and in what order they need to be done based upon where you are in the life cycle of your business and the market conditions and your competition. Have that plan, work the plan. Don't allow yourself to be distracted. Allow your plan time to succeed. Be patient, because you cannot rush great marketing. Understand that data improves decision-making, and that your analytics and your data will constantly evolve. So you're always continually getting the right message to the right customer or prospect at the right time at the lowest cost. And very important, practice that 90-10 content rule. 90% of the message should be about they and their business and their wants and needs, and only 10% be about you and your business. Recall what I said at the beginning. Customers want to buy. what solves their problems and fulfills their desires. And between the two, though, customers generally want their problem solved first. So if it comes to push or shove and deciding which path to go down, prioritize your marketing around customer problems first, and then secondly around solving whatever desires they have beyond solving their initial problems. Let's have a little fun here just to kind of wrap up. These are some hopefully recognizable logos, and I like showing these because there's sometimes some surprises. We don't think about what we see every day because it goes by in a truck or we see it in an advertisement. But I wanted to point these out. And if we start with the FedEx logo, I think everybody recognizes it. Has anyone ever noticed that the little arrow that's formed between the E and the X and how that relates to what they do? They move things. How about this manufacturer, this business here, Gillette? Now, obviously, all the letters are canted to the right, but notice how there's what looks like a slash between the I and into the G. Kind of speaks to the product, razors. How about Amazon? Notice the positioning of the arrow from A to Z. As we all know, Amazon pretty much has everything from A to Z that they offer. And lastly, we have this logo here. No name attached to it, but I think we all recognize it as Shell Oil. Shell Oil this is one of the most recognized brands in the world for decades. And they were early on able to establish, like a lot of businesses, a logo that doesn't have to call out their name. It just has that level of brand recognition. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to show you these to the extent you maybe didn't realize some of these things and why they're there. So to conclude, I'm offering a free blueprint that I created. It has to do with creating the right core values, mission, and vision for your business. And how does that relate to marketing? Well, marketing should be a reflection of what your core values are, and your marketing should help drive you towards your mission and help you achieve your vision. So it's important to have right mission and vision and to set as a foundation to everything you do, even beyond the 5 principles of marketing. What are the right core values for your business? I cover all those things in this blueprint. It's perfect to use for somebody who's starting a business brand new. You can use this to create the right value set, mission, and vision for your business. It's kind of a workbook format. You can work through it. You can also use this for an existing business to kind of vet and just do a reality check on your existing core values, mission, and vision. I offer it for free. There's a QR code there. Just snap that QR code, and it'll take you to a place where you can download it. And then beyond that, there's my phone number, my email, and my LinkedIn address. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to do that. And feel free to contact me. No obligation. If you just have a question and you want to talk through something you have, I'm happy to do that, no charge, and happy to be of help. So with that, I hope you all got something from this. I appreciate your time. And John, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Interesting presentation. Some of those things I think were very things that you kind of know, but you don't really know them. You know what I mean? The 90-10 rule sticks out for me here. But we've got a couple of questions from the audience here.
Okay.
The first one was, can you explain what the marketing database would include?
Yeah, great question. Your marketing database should include everything relative to your customers and prospects. The best thing I can think of just from a general standpoint would be a CRM platform. In fact, a lot of organizations run their marketing off of their CRM. So it's that repository for everything that relates to your customers and prospects and your interaction with them and their interaction with your products and services. So if it's an existing customer, that database should have information on what they've bought from you in the past, and information that could lead you to do some of that data mining to look for patterns. For instance, are they buying more in the summer versus the fall? What's the product mix look like for this customer versus the next customer? So really, it's everything that relates to your customers and prospects in one central location that allows you then to run your analytics off of that and then to direct your marketing messaging off of it.
So it's really your entire interaction with your customers, right? I mean, so if they, ideally, if they call in the help desk, you've got that in there.
Yeah.
You've got how many products they buy, a variety of things. That's an enormous database, and I would imagine
it can be.
That's sometimes
it can be
problematic for large companies or even small companies to get that much data. But yeah, that's That's the other thing that struck me is keeping this at an analytical level. So
Yeah.
your marketing can be sometimes vague, but you're keeping it at a level of, okay, let's measure it and let's see how
Yeah.
we've done this there.
The other way to think about the reason for having a dedicated marketing database to bring all this information into, I remember the fable about the people in the desert, and they're all blind, and they're asked to touch an elephant, and one person touches the ear and thinks it's a fan, another person touches the thighs, thinks it's a wall, or touches the leg and thinks it's whatever. I don't remember the exact details. The point is that they all had a different perspective. That's what can happen. You can get a different view of what the reality is when you've got some of the information about your customers in a database over here, for instance, orders, and your customer service has a different database. You've ultimately got to bring all that into one place so you have one single view of the customer and all your interactions with them.
Yeah, it is it's essential to have that sort of analytics here. So here's a question from Vince Rogers. He said, for the customer experience, a surprise and delight, he sells premium mangoes by the pound, and he usually adds 1 or 2 pounds extra in each package. So he over delivers. Now, he said, I've read that I shouldn't do that anymore because if I ever stopped, then it leads to disappointment. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. The idea of delivering 120% value for 100% price in the long run is better than discounting, giving you 100% value for a 90% price.
Yeah.
That's going in the opposite direction in terms of building your business and revenues and cash flow. So I endorse the idea of giving 120% value for 100% price as an example. The challenge with giving it, and you're right, when you stop or alter it down the road, you have people will forget that they were getting 120%. They're going to say, hey, you got a takeaway now. What I would encourage you to think about, and I don't have a thought off the top of my head, is to think about another way you can deliver that value in a different form or fashion so that when you alter it or change it, it won't be directly perceived as a takeaway from the product itself. It may be providing recipes, how to, here are 100 different ways to use mangoes in your diet and what you prepare for your families. Here are some party ideas. That might be just an idea that comes to mind, and offering those for free. And maybe striking an affiliation with a complementary supplier. So I don't know what goes with mangoes. Maybe it's maybe it's a manufacturer of glassware so that you can send along a small set of glasses that they can use for having mango juice. Just a couple of ideas off the top of my head.
The thing that I'm would like to know here from Vince is, do you tell people that you've given them 1 or 2 pounds
Yeah.
extra? Because sometimes, just like you said, Mark, a personal note, they didn't send you extra socks. They just had a personal note. Thank you very much for your,
Yeah.
for being a customer.
Yeah. Make sure you
So,
point it out because they may not notice, right?
yeah, right. And so you kind of lose the oh, okay. So Vince said yes on the package slip. He circles the orders and writes in the actual weight there.
Okay.
So good. So what's the URL to get the blueprint? I'm assuming that's performadvisors.com. Is that right?
Yeah, you could go to my website, www.performadvisors.com. And above the fold on my first page, the landing page of my website, you can go there to download it as well. So www.performadvisors.com, or you can snap a picture of this QR code. It'll take you right to the download.
Okay. And how does the blueprint relate to a business plan?
Blueprint, in this case, for your core values, your mission and vision is really the starting point, I contend, for every business. Your business plan should be informed by what your core values are. And your core values, I contend, are the DNA of your business. They are what you stand for, what's important to you, what's not negotiable. They're the DNA for your business. And so it's kind of hard to have a business plan if you don't first understand what is your DNA as a business? Why are you here in the first place? And why do you want to be here based upon those core values? The other thing to keep in mind too is your business plan should flow along with your mission and vision, but you should first inform your mission and your vision, then build your business plan off of that. I see a lot of organizations do everything sort of backwards. They will create a mission and a vision, and then they'll say, well, what are our core values? You got to have your core values first. That's the foundation. That's the foundation of the building. Because if you do your mission and vision without having a good foot on your core values, it's like building a house on sand rather than having a foundation per se. So the business plan goes along with core value, mission, and vision, but I would contend that core values, especially, and your mission and vision need to be informed first, or you at least have an idea of that to help inform your business plan.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. I was just talking about that the other day, that mission vision, sometimes that's a little iffy, and but core values is what your company, that's your company culture in a sense. I mean, that's what you stand for. And no matter what your mission and vision is, if you don't stand for your core values, people are going to notice that. So
Yep. And
um,
what you stand for is what you'll get.
yep, absolutely right.
Right. Yep.
So here's a question. I think we know the answer, but does this apply to B2B marketing?
Say that again.
Does your strategy apply to B2B marketing, business
Yes.
business?
Yeah. In fact, that example I gave you of those marketing analytics with those three messages of Caterpillar, that was a B2B audience, strictly a B2B audience. They were Caterpillar machine users. So they were contractors, mining operations that were serving other customers. So all of these principles are universal, B2C or B2B.
So do you have tips for a one-person team for gathering the client data that we talked about a little earlier?
Yeah, like all the other million things you have to be worried about, right? It's just another task. To the extent that you can, if you have the resources or wherewithal, engage a VA to help you. There are virtual assistants out there. A lot of people think of virtual assistants as somebody that kind of helps you from an admin standpoint for your whole
Yeah.
business, but there are virtual assistants out there that can help you with everything relative to business, including helping with marketing and establishing a database and even doing the analytics. And if anybody's interested, they can contact me. I can put you in touch with an individual who her business is actually helping VAs, and she's got a Rolodex that's quite deep, and she can provide a recommendation for VAs for anything in business. So if you have the resources to afford someone like that, and the nice thing about VAs is that they're not on your payroll, so you're not paying for payroll, you're engaging them as a supplier. And generally their hourly rates are fairly reasonable, and you can dictate how much time you want to have from them because most of them have that flexibility. If you don't have that capability, I would lean into organizations like the American Marketing Association. There are local marketing associations around the country. There's the Business Marketing Association and or people in associations. So given the industry you're in, quite often the association that supports the industry you have, they'll have free resources that can help you.
Good. Yeah, that's a good suggestion, because a lot of times the associations that are related to your industry are very interested in having you succeed and having the industry.
Yeah. And by the way, I forgot, call your score mentor.
Yeah, well, that's another
Yeah.
very good thing to do.
We should not leave that off the table.
Yeah. So Vince, who's the guy with the mangoes, he said lured away doesn't fall under price. When you were talking about the reasons that customers leave, I think one of them was lured away. And he says, when I lose someone, it's nearly always a lowest price chaser.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lured away, it could include price, but price per se, in terms of the research that was done, lured away could be they just offered a better deal in terms of delivery or support before and after the sale. So those can be other factors that can lure a customer away. But yeah, if you've got, but lured away could also be a price play as well. And here's how I would view people who are reacting on price alone. Think about the attributes of a loyal customer. A loyal customer will buy more often. They will refer others to you, and they will resist the temptation to leave. They'd rather fight than switch. And they will tolerate, a loyal customer will tolerate some differential in price and also the occasional hiccup that we all might have from time to time. We may have a hiccup that will be quite forgiving, as opposed to being a spur of the moment and go with anybody who has the lowest price only. The challenge with going with the lowest price and trying to compete on lowest price, it's like being a gunslinger in the old West. You can be the fastest gun around, but sooner or later, someone's going to come along with a faster gun or a lower price, and they're going to beat you. So you got to try to win on something other than price alone.
Well, and normally what that is value. Try to highlight the value of your product, because value will, in effect, trump price a lot of times. If people perceive they're getting more value, and more value could be the customer touch, the note, various other things. And so, yeah, so competing on price, I don't remember. I think it might have been Welch at GE who's saying, if you're competing on price, then you're a commodity, and you don't want to be a commodity.
Right, right. Excuse me.
Right. And you don't have to be a commodity. And my prime example of that is Purdue chickens, right? What's more of a commodity than a chicken? And Purdue made chickens, an experience, sort of like Starbucks making coffee an experience.
Right.
So there's ways to do that. So next question is, I'm starting a new business. What should I do for training? How long should I train before hiring? And should I use a model for my business that is current?
Is the question with respect to training for your marketing or just training for your employees in general? Excuse me.
I'm not sure. Nicole, can you, here. Um, oh, she said all. So that's training for marketing and training for the employees. And I'm thinking you can answer the marketing question.
Yeah, I could actually I could attack off all that question just from an overall perspective as well, because some of the other topics I speak on are employee engagement and building team collaboration and so on. The best way to consider training your people and bringing them on board is to start in your onboarding and even your recruitment phase. And keep in mind that there are 5 questions that employees are always asking, or prospective employees. What is it you want me to do? How should I do it? Which relates directly to the training piece, because the implications there is how should I do it has to do with, what are the knowledge and skill sets I need to have, and how do I apply them on the job to get the job done that you want me to do? The third question is what I call the performance question. How am I doing at it? You need to make sure you're always answering that. And that's more than just an annual review. The fourth question is what I call the motivation question. Why should I do what you want me to do, or what's in it for me? And that's where recognition and incentives come into play. And the last question is, where am I going? What's my future here? So if you have those questions in mind when you're setting out to bring people in and onboard them and finding the right individuals, understand they're always going to be asking or wanting to have answers to those questions. And you want to answer those questions for them rather than letting them fill in the blank or fill in the answers on their own.
Good. Yeah. It is amazing that people often sort of expect new employees to know everything about the
Yeah.
company. And often it's like, no, I don't know anything at all. So that's very good advice for that in both sides. And obviously training is going to depend on the complexity of what you're training them on.
Yep, exactly. And the other tip I would offer with training too is to understand that putting information into people's brains and getting them to retain it, or teaching them how to use their hands or a skill itself, and getting to repeat that in itself does not make your training or learning successful. Successful learning and training and skills development is giving people the confidence to actually use it. So it's not enough to merely say, okay, you're now trained, you got the stuff and you remember it. They have to have the confidence to use it as well.
And the other thing with that is, and this can be a bit dangerous sometimes, is the confidence to know when they have an exception or when they have something that they should go to you about.
Yeah.
Because often you give people process, procedure, here's what you're supposed to do. But a lot of times there's some situation that's outside of those normal parameters. And so understanding that is often a very a very helpful thing,
Yes.
but can be
And look for people that are problem solvers.
yeah, absolutely. That's the way to look at it. So
Yep.
here's a question. I'm the author of nonfiction books. Most of my sales come through Amazon, so I don't have access to a lot of data about my customers. But I do have a website and social media. Should I add every interaction with my customers into a CRM so I can at least have some collection of this data? What would you recommend?
I would agree with that. I would say if you can pull that off, you should do that. Yes.
Yeah, I'm actually, well, I guess I'm surprised, but I may not be surprised that you're not able to get the customer data from Amazon. I'm not familiar with how they
Yeah.
operate on that, but
No, I'm not either.
they
There might be
may,
some basic analytics, but yeah, certainly whatever you can glean from other sources like your website
yeah,
and other interactions. Yeah, whatever data and attributes you can bring in and analyze, that's better than not having anything to analyze.
yeah, yeah. And you can also use the comments particularly, or the reviews and that sort of data
Yes.
on Amazon. I was talking to a client recently who found that people were creating videos on Amazon for his product, and it was amazing. And it was just something that they decided to do. So
Yeah.
there is data there that you can potentially get here. Next question. Do you have suggestions or methods for a new business without an established customer base to discover the needs and wants of potential customers and to target the marketing properly?
Yeah, that's usually the toughest part of starting a business is to understand who's your ideal customer. So that the first question to ask is who is your ideal customer based upon what you have to offer? And some of that is a thought process you go through and thinking about it. The other thing you can do is go out and look at, are there other players in the marketplace that are doing what you want to do now, and look at where they're going, where they're placing their marketing. Look at some of the stuff that they're doing. If you can identify who you believe your ideal audience is, your ideal target, your avatar customer, go talk to some of them, interview them, and say, "Hey, I had this concept. What can you tell me? What feedback can you give me? Here are the features and benefits of it. Tell me what you like or don't like about these." So it's kind of it's a labor intensive effort, and you don't have to do a census. You don't have to talk to the entire world, but just going out and first of all answering that question: who's my ideal customer? Finding who those potential customers are and talking to them and describing what you have in mind and getting their feedback and letting them give you feedback to inform you to make sure that you've got something that that audience is going to eagerly adopt. So in that case, your number one imperative is talking to potential customers to understand what they're going to eagerly adopt. So that's your number one marketing imperative.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things, if you can find out why they're buying,
Yes.
what is it? What is it that sparks that decision for them to all of a sudden make the purchase? And again, if you have a new business and you're thinking about some of these things, your score mentor can provide a lot of good background information and we've got a lot of scars on things that we've not done right that we can advise people on. But yeah, you're right that the thing is to identify what is the problem that my typical customer has that I'm
Right.
now solving.
Yep.
And that's we have another question that's similar. What about a new business with no data? Well, market research, find out. That's,
Yeah.
that's the key element here is finding out from your customers, because a lot of times you'll start a business and people may or may not be interested in it, but if
Yeah.
you talk to them, you'll find out what they are interested in, and you can switch it to something that is more relevant.
Yeah. The last thing you want to do is spend a lot of energy and resources and money and effort and put something out there that nobody will buy because what you think may be the world may not be the world. It's a very common affliction among inventors. They invent something, and because it's their baby, they think the world's going to adopt it and embrace it. And unless they do the proper research, quite often inventors become sorely disappointed. because they think they have something the world wants, but in fact, the world does not want it, or the world doesn't want it in the way in which they've invented it, and they need to make some
Right.
changes.
And Mark, this was part of your presentation where you were talking about, um, the idea is nobody wants to buy your product.
Yep.
They have a problem and they want to solve that problem and they want a solution to that problem. They don't necessarily want a tool. And so the idea here is to find what that problem is. And we help aspiring entrepreneurs go through that process at SCORE by saying, okay, what is your value proposition and who are your potential customers? Just those two questions
Yes.
can bring a lot of good information in here. And sometimes people find out their customers are not who they thought their customers
Yeah.
would.
And you won't know until you ask.
Right, right. And
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
and
You
they,
always want to, your first step, you always want to make sure your first step is not into quicksand.
yeah,
And the whole notion of, and what you're talking about, John, is a lot of repair before failure mindset.
yeah,
And repair before failure, or prevent it versus fix it, is based upon doing some things ahead of time, and doing things from an informed point of view rather than second guessing and then being disappointed
right.
or
Well,
surprised.
I mean, it's fundamental. What you're saying is if you want to do proper marketing, have a plan, right?
Mhm.
Think about what it is that you're going to do and then analyze what you're doing. For business, it's exactly the same way. Have a plan, and then have metrics to go along that business and say, hey, is this the way we should do it? Should we move here? But always be ready to change that.
And refine,
Um,
and always be prepared to refine. And also another tip I would add, and I actually, the more I think about it, I should probably add this to the presentation. When it comes to measuring or having metrics and measures in place to measure results,
yeah,
I would contend that you need to keep in mind that there are actually two steps to measurement and defining results or getting results. The first part is the easy part, and that's getting a result. So we marketed to the people and we had this many sales, and then we changed our marketing message and we got more people that bought more of this product versus the other, and some of that refining helped us increase our sales or our margins because we had a better product mix.
hmm
Um, so you've got a result. The second part of measurement is the more important one, and that is asking the question, what's the meaning and significance of the number?
yeah,
What is this telling us, and what should we do about it?
right,
Because marketing in business is an iterative process. It's always constantly refining and improving. And if you just have a result and you end there and you don't question or have a curiosity about the meaning and significance of the number and what are we going to do about it, or what should we do about it, you're not going to have that iterative ability to keep going forward and sustaining.
yeah, absolutely right. And we have another question here. For a startup, what are the resources to begin market research?
Again, I would look to associations that relate to the business you're in.
Mhm.
Good old internet searches too can be a place to start. And you can refine your search, but you can start broadly. So you could look there. You could also find mentors within SCORE, and or people that are thought leaders in that industry. So if you're going into well, the mango business, according to our friend there, he may be a thought leader himself in that business, or he knows
Mhm.
people that are in the produce world or the
Yeah,
mango world that know a lot. And so going to people who have already been living it is a great place to start. And when you approach it's human nature that if you approach people the right way, we all have innate in us a desire to help others.
yeah,
And if you approach it properly, people are willing to help if you approach them in a respectful manner.
yeah. I mean, I was just going to say, ask somebody who's done it.
Yeah.
And that could be your score mentor. That can be, other people that have done this. We have one last question here.
Okay.
Can you market directly to industry and SIC code?
Yes. In the case of that Caterpillar project
Yeah.
I mentioned, we
hmm
did a lot of targeted marketing into specific industries based upon SIC code. And you can get that information from databases that exist that the government has through The Department of Commerce, you can also get it through data appends from places like Dun& Bradstreet. I know Dun& Bradstreet, they have a lot of, they classify businesses by SIC codes. So the answer is yes, you can market to specific SIC codes if you know
And
what they are.
right. And one way to do that, we always recommend that people contact their local library. And if they have a business librarian there, a lot of times the library will have access to some of these databases that have SIC codes and
Yeah,
industries, and they can help you go through that. So again, one of the values of getting in touch with SCORE is that we know a little bit of those tricks,
right.
of go to the library, which normally people wouldn't necessarily think about, but they've got a lot of
They
good
do.
information, and they can help you analyze it as well.
Right. And then quite often that's free stuff because your local library is part of a library district. And if you're a
Yeah,
member there, you're a customer.
yeah,
So take advantage of that. And the advantage of mentors in places like SCORE, like you, John, you mentioned it already, is that you've already got the scars and you know where the pitfalls are and the places where things can go wrong. So taking advantage of SCORE mentors allows you to be immediately in a prevent it versus fix it or a repair before failure mode.
yep. So if you go to the next slide here, Mark.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, no problem, no
Let
problem.
me do that. Let me just do that real
What
quick.
what I wanted to let people know is that if you like this webinar, SCORE has a lot more. And so visit our website or your local SCORE website for a list of webinars. So here's something, just a listing of those
Yeah.
webinars. And the next slide here is a QR code for us. If you want to request a mentor, you can use this QR code. Just hold your camera up to the screen and it will send you to the request a mentor. If you're not in our area, as I put in the chat, just go to the SCORE website and request a mentor, put in your zip code, and they'll assign you to a mentor in your particular area here. So, Mark, thanks a lot.
My
It's always
pleasure.
fun. And thanks a lot. And thanks to everyone for participating here in our webinar. And watch this space at the your local SCORE website for additional webinars in the future here. Thanks
All
a
right.
lot, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. My pleasure, John.
Mhm.